I don't suggest that I am putting forth anything surprising when I say that the world is caught in a time of great change. Environmental change, cultural change, economic change, purposeful eradication of physical cash and change by the government in order to completely control the flow of currency. Oh, and the Pokemon trading card game has a format rotation coming up soon. So on and so forth. Now, this is far from news. Anyone who's been paying attention for anything for any length of time will have noticed that we are caught in the midst of great transitions. In fact, it seems as if the only constants have been change, death, and taxes, though Trump may be fixing that last one soon. But perhaps one of the deepest and most fundamental shifts in the world around us has been one that has accompanied us alongside the vast majority of our evolution. A change in nature. Since the most basal forms of humanity have been fucking up the evolutionary arms race with our pro-gamer rock-throwing skills, we've had a growing impact on the environment and all of the cogs in this great machine of flora, fauna, fungi, and the likes. As discussions of climate change, a dreadfully loaded phrase, I know, has risen and renewed throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, the agricultural, industrial, and technological revolutions and their consequences are at the forefront of many people's minds. Although, I fear, sometimes, not enough people's minds. Fortunately, when topics of astronomical importance find that they are struggling to gain ground in the common social dialogue, one of the greatest tools for breaking into the culture is through music. This is a sentiment seemingly shared by 30-year-old British artist, composer, singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist Cosmo Sheldrake. Yes, that is his real name, and is fantastically well-fitting at that. Cosmo is a strange animal, eccentric in a manner only found in deep corners of the British Isles. Quite the quirky little Anglo, his person has a curious and childlike wonder to it, matched only in veracity by his ingenuity as a wordsmith and musician. Having played the piano since age 4, his repertoire of capabilities with musical instruments stretches from banjo to sousaphone, didgeridoo to slide whistle, koto drums and dudux, and some 30-odd others in between. This wide musical skill set provides a vast well for him to draw from, giving his works a tonal depth unmatched by most songs produced in the modern landscape of the music industry. A fitting analogy would be to call him a woodland oasis in a sprawling world of mass-produced, targeted, and overly efficient hit factories. A sharp contrast between his symphonic wilderness and the commonplace attitude of appealing to sanitized tastes. Nowhere is this more evident than in his 2018 debut album, The Much Much How and I. This 14-track album, or technically 16 with re-release, captures the plight of an endangered natural world with all of the poetic lyricism and experimental instrumentation that few people besides Sheldrake could muster. Rather than going through the album song by song in perfect order, I'll cover the broader strokes, while bringing up some lyrics and themes that really speak to me. Cosmo received the title for The Much Much How and I from a free-form poetry session with his friend and poet Nadia Cheney. In the workshop, participants freely wrote for several minutes, capturing their stream of consciousness, and handed the mess to their neighbor, who would rearrange the words into a new poem. When Sheldrake's poem was returned to him, the last line of it said, The Much Much How and I. The choice to use this as the album title seems quite unorthodox. At first glance, it seems more like a jumble of words than any sort of label representative of the contents of the music that it is attached to. Vaguely poetic, certainly, but not very cohesive. Of course, once you do take the music into account, the meaning is revealed. The Much Much How and I is, in essence, about the relationship between humans and nature, and all the ways one might impact the other. The title expresses this in 3 ways. First, scale. When you look at the title, you can see it's kind of lopsided. The imbalanced number of words and the repetition of the much emphasizes the size difference between the observer, represented by a single letter, and their infinitely more larger surroundings. Second, complexity. From a grammatical standpoint, the title is very difficult to read. It's a jumbled mess of conjunctions, pronouns, and adverbs. If there is a right way to go about reading it, which we aren't even guaranteed, finding it requires acknowledging quite a bit of nuance. And third, intimacy. This is the much how, and I. It is about the relationship between ourselves and that larger, more confusing whole. The use of the word and serves linguistically to highlight how we should be considered as both separate from and alongside that summation of parts. The album is rife with these themes of scale, complexity, and intimacy, which Cosmo Sheldrake uses to discuss humanity's impact on and views of the environment. I would like to highlight 5 key songs that I think demonstrate this best. Linger Longer opens the album with a gradually layering procession of complex and ever-changing melodies, moving from TV static to slow woodwinds to bells and chimes and electronica and everything in between. The song is about rewilding, the conservation method of reintroducing wildlife into an area that was previously developed for human use. In this calling back of nature to take its roots and repair damages, Sheldrake calls to mind imagery of a vast array of animal features. Linger Longer points out that, in order to begin repairing the planet to a more stable state, we must take first the steps to invite the wilds back where they belong. Side note, is it just me, or would that section I just played make a great incantation for a druid? Egg and Soldiers mainly describes the human tendency for self-absorption, with lines like,
I was looking over at my shoulder, only thinking of the short term. The time was looking back at me.
This self-obsession is shown to be circular, repeating in cycles that accrue problems over time. Rather than focusing on the present to find solutions, the narrator is content to sit and procrastinate, lazily enjoying their meal.
Every day I eat an egg and soldier, then I sit a little longer on a blanket made for 3.
And just as how the narrator is taking up more space than they could ever need, or on a blanket made for 3, industrial and post-industrial societies are notorious for their extraneous consumption of resources. The song goes on to describe the continual exhaustion of fossil fuels and the deforestation often necessary to acquire them.
Got the rambles down, search for heaven underground. It was lost but now it's found.
As well as referencing the effects of climate change on sea levels.
We drank the ocean, play while men get drowned. Submarines will save us now.
The chorus continues this theme of short-sightedness by referencing Jack and the Beanstalk, wherein Jack, ignorant of the impact of his choices, hastily trades his cow for the promise of magic beans, risking harm not only to himself, but to his family.
Swap a cow for lean and grow a stalk to tangle with the cloud.
This, in many ways, parallels unhampered commodification. By blindly concentrating on satisfying our own current needs, we often ignore the bigger picture, potentially causing problems to those around us, our environment, and even our future selves. And when we try to find solutions to those problems, we usually find that our actions have made things too late to fully turn back.
What's done is done. You'll never find the answer till it's gone.
If you were to capture the full existence of Earth in a 24-hour day, the entire history of humanity would fit in less than 2 seconds. We, as a species, are young, dumb, and incredibly powerful. Cosmo explores this idea of deep time, a forgotten and unimaginably vast period of history that is completely inaccessible to our understanding. Pliocene discusses the fragility of survival, referencing the last epoch before the evolution of the modern human species, as well as the plethora of animals that have been driven to extinction as a consequence. Partly, at least, this was due to the ignorance of early man, with their remarkably poor track record when it came to conservation efforts. Other songs on the album, like Solar Waltz and Axolotl, are dedicated solely to the plight of some of these individual animal species, like bees and axolotls. While some would say that this slow eradication of animal and plant life is just the natural course of things, part of the complex progression of the natural world, the degree to which humans have played direct roles in dooming multiple individual species cannot be understated.
There goes that myth again, that all of this is but a machine.
The repeating chorus of "Here We Go Again" harkens back to a lineage of cyclical disasters, with the rise of man being the sixth in a series of mass extinction events. The question is, if we can mitigate the damages this late into the cycle.
Come along, catch a heffalump, sit with me on a muddy clump, we'll sing a song of days gone by.
Quite possibly my favorite song of the album, Come Along, is a storybook depiction of a perfect world, one in which we can run along to endless days and nights full of song, feasts, dance, and relaxation. There are no worries. Greed, anger, and boredom have no grasp here. All is well, but sadly, it's only a dream. There are hints throughout that even in this wantless place, the dream is fraying, and reality is closing in. As much as you would wish to come along and linger a bit longer in this natural paradise, you must resist the siren's call. Time is precious, and as much as we wish to lounge about in this natural ecstasy, that is simply time that cannot be afforded to pass us by. The final track of the Much Much How How and I is Hocking, which is among the most brimming songs of Cosmo's work in terms of volume and instrumentation. Its beginning reads like chirping birdsong as Sheldrake lets his lyrics loose with full luster and confidence. The verses preceding this have been building a slow tension, questions, thoughts, wants, and concerns lurking just below the surface. In Hocking, they are relieved, not so much as extracted and explored, but more exploded into the forefront in a brass elephant's procession. Trumpets blare, calling the herd to rally in and out of harmony as they parade onward into some unknown place. This final sound-off of the album is a vibrant call to action. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. There is work to be done, and it must be done as early, but as carefully as possible. More haste, less speed. But what does this mean to you? I won't sit here and tell you that I have specific answers on how to right the wrongs of the world. I won't tell you that I know what will happen in 10, 20, 100 years. I won't tell you that ocean acidification, global warming, mass extinction, and a plethora of other environmental ailments are solely, or even mostly, the outcome of human actions. But I will tell you this. Whatever is causing these problems, we have the ability to do something about it. The human race is extraordinarily powerful. If we can conquer every continent multiple times over, put men on the moon, and harness the force of the sun to vaporize entire cities, there really isn't any problem that is beyond our purview. If it means we have to eat less cows or liquidate Southeast Asia to get the job done, so be it. Whatever the case, The Much Much How How and I is a damn good album. It's unlike anything else I've ever heard, and I recommend you give it a chance. And as always, freak out.